Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Julie Owen. I'm a faculty member in the School of Integrative Studies here at George Mason University. I'm so excited to talk with you today a little bit as you head into the 2020 Leadership Mason Experience, Leading for Positive Change. I was asked by Nick and Lisa and Kristen and the rest of the team to just say a few words about maybe some foundational ideas about leadership as you head into the next couple of weeks. I'm sorry I can't be there with you today directly, but I teach Friday afternoon, so you get me in the Zoom format, which y'all are getting very accustomed to these days, right? So part of leadership is adjusting to change, so that's what we're doing. I'm going to share some slides with you, not to be too much like a class, but I think just to sort of give you some background about where we're going to go in the next few minutes here. Okay. Okay, so again, my name is Julie Owen, and these are some things that I work on. My research and scholarship is actually on college students like yourselves and how we develop more college students who are interested in collaborative and collective leadership for positive change. And fewer folks who are interested in leadership that's about win as much as you can or boss other people around and get them to do my bidding, right? So why do some people go one route and some people go the other? And so my most recent book, which is in the center here, is called We Are the Leaders We've Been Waiting For, Women in Leadership Development in College. It really explores the journeys and unique challenges that women face as they navigate the leadership labyrinth. I would love to see you all as just an invitation in our leadership studies courses. INTS 405 is Women in Leadership. And then Dr. Nick Lennon, who you'll hear from, teaches ethics and leadership. So there are many options for you if you choose to get inspired from this few weeks to go in and get academic credit for some of this work as well. It's a little about me. So why is leadership hard to define, right? So you signed up for this conference, you knew it was something that seemed good for you to have, but what is confusing about it? So I always like to start with a little bit of humor. This is Calvin and Hobbes, a comic strip from the 80s and 90s. Calvin says, I'm the decisive, take charge type. I'm a natural leader. See, we'll go this way. Hobbes says, have fun. And then Calvin says, the problem is that nobody wants to go or want to lead them. So this may feel true for you. You may be someone who is, are you a leader if you're only leading yourself, right? Some people say yes, some people say no. There is a concept of leadership called self-leadership, but also it's always more fun and we get more ideas when we work in collaboration, right? So Calvin needs to get his act together and get more collaborative. And then the ultimate leadership guru, Michael Scott from The Office, the US version of The Office. And he's paraphrasing Machiavelli here, who says, would I rather be feared or loved? He says, easy, I want people to be afraid of how much they love me, which is only Michael Scott brilliance in the way he can say that, right? So there is this idea that some leaders are fearful and intimidating, and other leaders make people feel valued and seen. So which would you like to know? So you can't talk about leadership without talking about power. And so there's this idea that leadership involves influence and influence over, influence with, influence to, right? What ways do you exert your influence? So I just wanted to put this up here that there are a variety of kinds of power. So leaders might hold many of these, not just one, but some lead from predominantly one kind of power. So position power, certainly Dr. Washington, who's the president of George Mason University, has position power. When Dr. Washington calls me, I pick up the phone and do what he says, right? I listen to him differently than I would when a peer makes a suggestion to me. There's expert power. In this day and age, right now with COVID, we see lots of medical experts. A person who can make the vaccine is going to have all kinds of influence and power, right? Or people. The person who can fix the Wi-Fi if your internet goes down when you're trying to Zoom learn has expert power. Referent power, sometimes called relational power, is who do you actually know? So probably the administrative assistant who controls Dr. Washington's schedule, right, has some referent power. People who are good at networking can often refer people to the right people. That's an important form of influence you might have. And then there's the power to punish, the power to reward. So each of these are processes that leaders can wield as they go throughout leadership. So which of these feels most comfortable for you? Which of these might you want to learn more about? And then why do we even talk about leadership or develop leadership? Because we worry about bad leaders, and we've seen them. You all could name folks who you think are bad leaders. Oftentimes these folks don't intend to make bad decisions, but they are subject to the influences of power. They get seduced by power. They might be deceitful. They start to be inconsistent. pressures from their organization makes them make unethical decisions, right? And so then you end up with leaders who are incompetent, rigid, callous, corrupt, right? So how do we guard against this? How do we have fewer of these kinds of leaders and more kinds of leaders for positive change, right? And so that's what we're aiming for this week, is to reduce people's seductive habits of when people get into power. Is it, they say power corrupts? Absolutely, right? So how do we watch out for that in leadership? There's some key debates in leadership that you might want to ponder as you go throughout the next 2 weeks. And these are debated, there's folks who have beliefs on both sides of the table. So I can point you towards research or scholarship that talks about either way. But we tend to have, the lead office and the leadership curricular program MESA tends to have a certain set of beliefs. So I just want to put them out there. You don't have to agree with them necessarily, but you might want to question or interrogate what you actually think as you form your own philosophy of leadership. We like to think that leadership can be developed. If leadership was only about selection or picking people who scored the highest on a test for leadership, we wouldn't maybe be here today, right? We think that leadership can and should be learned. That leadership occurs at all levels of the organization, is not just limited to formal positions. So it is not just the positional people who can exercise leadership. We actually want leaderful organizations where all folks have some kind of say and voice and influence into decision-making and processes. We like to say a charismatic personality is not a prerequisite for leadership. Many in my class would argue it certainly helps, right? When someone is charming and they're an excellent communicator, that's kind of what we mean when we say charisma. But there are many examples of more quiet leaders or introverted leaders, or people who make very powerful decisions, but don't necessarily show up in that big extroverted kind of way. So if you don't consider yourself a charismatic person, this program is still for you. I often say, I love to listen to introverts. I was like, introverts think before they speak. That means when they speak, they have something really important or powerful to say. That's such a mind-blowing thing to me as an extrovert who talks stream of consciousness all the time, right? There's not just one right way to lead. We're not going to try to put you into a mold of this is what leadership looks like. But leadership can take many forms and be encompassed by people with all kinds of identities and experiences in their lives. Leadership and management, we think of them as different but related constructs. So there's a pithy saying that managers do things right, leaders do the right things. And the point of that saying is that managers are people who get things done. They're about efficiency and effectiveness. But leadership involves a different set of processes around values and vision. So you might have worked for somebody who was a great leader and a terrible manager, or a great manager but didn't have sort of a vision for the company or the organization. The dream is to have people who are good at both, right? And hopefully that's you all who are participating in these next 2 weeks, that you can see that we need both vision and values and effectiveness to get things organized and make a difference in the world. Finally, from the big debates is do we need leaders committed to ethical action? Is ethics a core component of leadership? And I like to think that it is, especially in these modern times, that if you're not leading for the good of the world or from a place of morality and core values, then what are you doing? People always talk about Hitler at this point in our discussion, about someone who had charisma, he had the organizational and management skills, many of the checklists of leadership. But I like to call what he did as coercion or demagoguery, right? Because he didn't give people free will in all the ways that we like to think matter. So that's sort of our assumptions about leadership. Think about how you feel about those. You do not have to agree with me. I'd love to hear people who debate what they think, but all of this is part of you forming your own philosophy of leadership over the next couple of weeks. This is the definition that I know used in leadership studies, and I think the lead office as well would agree with this. Leadership is a relational and ethical process, people together attempting to accomplish positive change. Now we can debate each of these words, right? So notice this does not say a leader is. We're really looking at the processes of leadership, the things that happen between and among people, and not just who's in charge and who's the boss, right? And look at the word ethics in there, but it implies that people together organizing around shared interests can make a huge difference in the world. Those of you who are critical thinkers or savvy might be like, what's positive and who says what is positive? And I'm glad you're asking those questions. I hope you explore those the next couple of weeks. Is there such a thing as a universal good? And how is it about positive intention or positive outcomes? There's lots of layers to this definition, but I still think it might be slightly aspirational, but it's a beautiful thing to aim for. So I know this has been a little bit of a fire hose leading all this for you, but this is why it matters. Um, this is a recent survey of employers of college students when they're leaving college. 95% of employers believe leadership development should begin by age 21, and that leadership development should be part of every student's educational experiences. Now, to me, I look at this and think a little bit of like those dental commercials where it's like 2 out of 3 dentists recommend sugarless gum for their patients who chew gum. And you want to know who's that one weird dentist who's like, let's eat sugar, right? So I'm like, who are those 5% of people who don't want leadership skills in their organization? Sorry, I'm digressing. But you get this idea that employers want us to have leadership skills. So this will look great, this experience you're engaged in on your resume, and also will hopefully shift your thinking and develop even better answers about what you think leadership is and what you're looking for in the leadership and the organizations you will work for or are working for. I'm going to end on this slide, this note here, is what does this mean for you, right? So I've talked a little bit about what scholars think about leadership and the approach the lead office takes and what you might learn this week, but how do you think about your own leadership? How do you cultivate your own leadership capacity? Well, one of the issues is most leadership trainings and developments work on the upper left quadrant here on leadership capacity, which is that knowledge and behaviors and skills that are part of leadership. But we often don't take into account this upper right quadrant called leadership efficacy, or the belief that you can do it. One of the things, especially with Mason students I've seen, and especially with students who have multiple marginalized identities or from underserved communities, is that you might have an outstanding array of leadership capacity, but if you don't believe that you're capable of engaging in leadership, you are less likely to enact your leadership on the world, right? You're less likely to do it. So imagine that you have all this talent and skills and abilities, but you are holding yourself back because you don't think you're capable. So how do you do that? So we want to look at all the parts of the wheel here in the next couple of weeks, including your own motivation to lead, and talk about how you develop that motivation, or how do you find that motivation in others. So think about which aspects of this chart, leadership capacity, efficacy, motivation, or enactment you might want to work on. I'm going to end with this quote from the late, great RBG, the notorious RBG. Fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. That's my wish for you all this week, that you all tap into your passions and aspirations, find people or meet people, even if it's over Zoom, who might have shared aspirations and interests, and then build on that network and see what you can do to change the world and enact leadership for positive change. Thank you so much for listening. I invite you to reach out to me. The coordinators have my contact information if any questions, or if I can help you on your leadership journey. Have a great week.